Okay, for our next presentation, we have Natalie Barefoot of Earth Justice, and the title of her talk is Instrumental and Excremental, How Whales and Their Poop Fight Climate Change. Natalie is an international oceans attorney who believes that legal protection should be earth-oriented, community-inspired, and respect for all living things, focusing legal strategies through the lens of keystone species, such as sharks and cetaceans. Natalie advances protections for wildlife and their habitats. She currently tackles international ocean issues as a senior attorney with Earth Justice and is the founder of SET Law, SET as in cetacean. Her previous work has taken her to 5 continents as an attorney with the United Nations Environment Program, University of Miami School of Law, Hogan Levels, and as finance specialist with PAC Incorporated. Natalie loves to spend time with her clients diving, swimming, paddling in or on the water. And in 2023, Natalie contributed the chapter Whales and Climate in the book The Ocean and Us, which forms the basis of this presentation. Welcome, Natalie.
Welcome. Bienvenidos. Bienvenue. And welcome. Welcome to WhaleFest. Thank you for being here. Thank you for celebrating the whales with us and also coming to learn a little bit more about these big, beautiful beings in our oceans. So I'm going to talk to you today about whales and climate change. We're gonna work through 2 questions. The first is how whales are affected by climate change. And then secondly, we are going to talk about how whales actually contribute to mitigating the effects of climate change. So we're gonna work through those 2 questions. And first, we're gonna do a little bit of a housekeeping. As Dan was saying, SET was short for cetacean. Does anyone know what this word means? No one? You do.
A cetacean is a mammal that lives in the sea.
Yes, a mammal that lives in the sea. So a cetacean, and even narrower than that, it is a whale, dolphin, or porpoise, which are mammals that live in the sea. So remember that old Linnaeus classification system, kingdom, phylum, order? Yes, I see that. The word cetacea is the word for the order of which encompasses all whales, dolphins, and porpoises. So cetacean is the word for that, and I use it from time to time, so I need to teach what we're talking about. So these are all the cetaceans that you'll find around the world. There's over 90 species of cetaceans in our waters, and we get quite a number of them here in Monterey. This is a very special place to live and be able to see our cetacean friends in the water. They put them into categories of toothed and baleen whales. All the baleen whales are looking that way, and all the toothed whales are looking this way on this poster. And this poster isn't complete because we're actually learning more and finding new species from time to time. So one of the whales that's not on this poster is something called a Rice's whale. Has anyone heard of those? A couple of people, yeah. So Rice's whales are a species of whales that are found in the Gulf of Mexico, and they were thought to be a subspecies of Brutus whales, and in 2021 they were actually named a distinct species on their own. So a new whale species just 3 years ago was found. So we're still learning and finding out new things about our cetacean friends. Okay, so let's look at the first question of how are whales affected by climate change? This is a pretty complex question, so I'm not going to get into all of the aspects and all of the ways, but we're going to talk about 3 different ways that whales are affected by climate change. First is range shifts, second, food sources, and third, migration patterns. Okay, so how are whales going to change their ranges because of climate change, or how might that occur or look? Scientists have done studies where they've taken optimal temperature ranges. So the range where all the cetacean species live in the ocean, which is their optimal temperature. And they've taken that and modeled on that the data from the International Panel for Climate Change and looked at the different scenarios of how the ocean's temperatures would change, and then looking at how the ranges of the species would change due to those different scenarios. And what we found out is that 58% of cetacean species will actually have an increased optimal range temperature-wise. So that means there's more space in the ocean that they'll be able to use some of these species, 58%, right? And then the other part is 40% of cetacean species are going to see a decrease in the range that they're able to use in their optimal temperature range of habitat. So what does that mean for them? That means, one, we could see extinctions, right? They could get pushed totally out of their ranges and have no optimal range left and can't survive. We could see decreases in populations from small to significant when we're pushing species that are trying to be in the same optimal temperature range, right? And they're competing for resources. We're gonna have to see a balancing out of those species in that habitat, so we may see a decrease in populations of that species. And then third, they may adapt. Some species may be able to adapt. They may be able to adapt to the rate of increase that's happening and the temperature, or may be able to thrive in the smaller spaces that they have. So there are different outcomes that can happen with that. So this is a gray whale. This gray whale's name is Wally. And how many people have seen gray whales? Here we've got gray whales off our coast. Go whale watching, go meet them. If you're looking at them the right way, sometimes you can see their blows actually look like a heart. It's the most beautiful thing. So yeah, I encourage you to get out there and see our gray whales. So this gray whale, if you look at this boat, on the side of it, it says Guardia Costiera. This is the Italian Coast Guard. So what's weird about that? This guy's in the Atlantic Ocean. Our whales are over here in the Pacific Ocean. What's weird about that? Gray whales have been extinct in the Atlantic Ocean since the late 1700s. Human beings have whaled them into extinction. So what is this guy doing over there? This picture was taken back in 2021, and Wally was seen in North Africa, in Spain, off the coast of France, and Italy, of course. What happened was, because of climate change, because of declining sea ice and the different meltings of the ice, there's pathways that have now been created. And Wally actually is a Pacific gray whale that went over through the Arctic and into Europe and into the Atlantic Ocean, and that's how he got there. Wally, scientists followed Wally for months. He was malnourished and he actually passed away. Wasn't able to find the food he needed to survive and make his way in this new, weird, unknown habitat to him, right? Unfamiliar. Now this is another gray whale. And this picture is from March of last month. This is a gray whale. I haven't seen a name. I'm gonna call her Sally for our purposes, Wally Sally. And she was seen off of the coast of Cape Cod. So coming over to our side of the Atlantic, again, came over, Pacific gray whale that came over through the Arctic and was seen in the Atlantic waters. So they've actually matched this gray whale to pictures from another gray whale that was seen off the coast of Miami back in December 2023. And what the scientists observed when they saw Sally in March was that she was healthy. She looked good. So she looks good right now, and when she pops up again, I'm sure everyone's going to take a look, take the drone pictures and see and monitor to see how she's doing. Maybe she'll be able to figure it out. She's going north right now, so maybe she's trying to find her way back. Who knows? Or up to some sort of feeding grounds. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with her. These instances are called extreme range shifts, right? And this is something that we're going to see more and more with climate change. Animals that we don't see in certain parts of the world coming up and popping up in different areas because of climate change changing the way that they do their things. Okay, and now we're going to talk about food sources. So there's two aspects of food sources that climate change may affect whales with. One is the abundance, the amount of food, right? Climate change is affecting fish populations and actually causing decrease in fish populations. And when there's not an abundant amount of food available for the whales, scientists have actually seen correlations between the body size and the health of the fish runs that they depend upon. And some whale species are very picky eaters. They only want salmon, and they only want a certain type of salmon. And so when that happens, sometimes they're not really flexible in how they shift their food, and you'll see the correlation of body decrease. There's others that are more flexible eaters, and if some fish is not available, they may be able to pick up and eat something else and maintain themselves. So that also plays into the equation as well. And the second thing for food sources is the prey distribution. So where's the prey found? Scientists have also found that whales will change where they go in relation to when the prey moves around. So we've also seen off the east coast of the US, when the fish prey for the North Atlantic right whales the whales have moved along with them. And they're a protected species. So the government and lawyers like me and other people need to be nimble and quick and respond to that so that we're able to make sure that the protections are still covering them even though they're moving around a bit. So you see how difficult it is to kind of even into the management of whales as we get into climate change and things are shifting and not staying static, trying to keep up with how everything moves. Okay, migration patterns. All right, so we know some whale species, not all whale species, migrate. They'll go to the poles to feed, and then they'll go towards the equators to breed and mate. This climate change can affect the way that migrations take place. So the scientists have seen that the timing of migrations have been changing. Because of climate change. So whales will take the time when, for example, in the South Pacific, when the whales are coming, it's been a little bit delayed some seasons when they come. And we may see climate change shifting migratory patterns because one of the cues is temperature, right? There's some cues that they use for their migrations. And we're also seeing that whales are not migrating at all. So in some places, we've seen instances, for example, bowhead whales up in Alaska in the 2018, 2019, didn't do their normal migration and just stayed in place. And we don't know if that's due to climate change. There's some populations in the Pacific of humpbacks that have stayed rather than doing the migration. Some scientists theorize that perhaps it is because their prey source isn't as abundant, all kind of intertwined with climate change, and they know they can't make that trip, so they stay put. But that's also something that we're looking at vis-a-vis climate change and how it will affect whales. Okay, now the poop portion. What you've all come for. Okay, so do you know that there are some whales that over the lifespan of their time on this earth, they'll actually absorb more carbon than they'll emit? That's different than you and I. We are carbon emitters. So scientists are studying this all around the world, and it's called whale carbon. And they're looking at the biological processes that whales undertake and trying to figure out how they manipulate. They call them ecosystem engineers, how they engineer the ecosystem to absorb more carbon, and how their bodies themselves absorb carbon. So whales mitigate carbon in two ways. One, they do it with increasing nutrient availability in the ocean. And two, they do it by actually sequestering the carbon in their bodies themselves. So let's look into that. Okay, so the first way that they increase nutrient availability in the oceans is just by their movements, right? They dive on down, they come up, they're moving their pectoral fins, their flukes. It's called the whale pump. That's my fluke. It's something called the whale pump, and it's actually bringing nutrients that were falling to the bottom of the ocean up to the ocean's surface. And what happens there? Well, the nutrients become available to things called phytoplankton. And phytoplankton will take the nutrients, photosynthesize it, so take it and use carbon to photosynthesize with that nutrient. And the output is oxygen, right? So the ocean is a huge generator of oxygen for our Earth. Some people say every other breath you take is thanks to the ocean, because phytoplankton is seen to make at least over 50% of the oxygen that we breathe. So it's super important, and the whales bring these nutrients back up to the surface and mix it all around. And then there's one other way that whales make nutrients available to the ocean surface. And here it is, the poop. Whales poop, and that fertilizes the ocean. It brings the nutrients into the ocean, and it allows, again, the phytoplankton depends on that, and they use it, photosynthesize, and absorb more carbon and release oxygen into our world. So poop is really important. And so whales have been seen scientists know that they poop on the surface, so that's where they're doing it, in the place that we need it. So they're designed to do this where we need it and how. And they also don't poop in one place, right? A lot of whales migrate. So here's some of the migratory patterns of just one species, humpbacks. This is where they go summer and winter, feeding grounds and breeding grounds. So when they're doing this movement, they're pooping and moving nutrients in different parts of the world, places in the ocean that are actually nutrient poor and really need this fertilization and need this movement. So this is sometimes called the great whale conveyor belt, and how whales just kind of fertilize and move things around. And the other way that whales help absorb carbon is by carbon sequestration. So whales, and this is first through their biomass. So whales are big. They're long-lived, right? The bowhead whale lives up to 200 years in the water, and they're huge. So these, as they're living and moving around, they're keeping carbon in their body. They're carbon stores, biomass. So this is one way that they actually sequester the carbon in their bodies. And then also, when whales die, they will go to the bottom of the ocean. This is called deadfall, and specifically for whales, whale fall. At the bottom of the ocean, there could be a whole nother lecture on whale falls, where there's actually little ecosystems that are created out of decomposing the body, eating the body. There's species that specialize in this. It's very cool. So other species take in the carbon, and then the other skeletons and bones that are left there come into the sediment of the ocean. And it stays down there in the ocean. So this is different than a tree, right? A tree will fall, die, fall over, and when it starts to decompose, it actually re-releases carbon into the atmosphere. This is not happening with whales, and this is why they're such great carbon sequesterers. It's also why it's important to keep them in the ocean and not whale them and not take them out of the water. So this is just a slide to show you the whole cycle of it. Our little phytoplankton, the whale pump, deadfall carbon, whale fall, or biomass just living there, and the great whale conveyor belt. There's the poop. And the cool thing about this is that the world is taking notice of this and actually incorporating it into our actions. So the International Whaling Commission passed a resolution and a declaration back in 2018 regarding how whales are ecosystem engineers. So recognizing this and encouraging countries to incorporate this valuing of them in a different way. This is really important because the International Whaling Convention was designed and created to create sustainable whale populations in order to harvest and kill them. So this is a complete mind shift, right? We're looking at valuing whales not as just commodities, but as partners in our Earth ecosystems and as partners in our combat, in trying to combat climate change. And this is fantastic news. And the work still goes on where people are looking at this, but the take home is that a healthy and robust population of whales is good for the Earth and good for our hearts, and will help us to mitigate climate change. So as a lawyer and as someone who tries to protect the oceans and the species in it, as well as the Earth and its people, we're looking at this and we would like to increase legal protections for not just the populations that we have now, but we want the legal protections to actually support increasing whale populations around the world so that they can continue to be partners and amplify their work as partners in the fight against climate change. So thank you. And one more. And fins up for questions. Oh! What? Would you prefer to come up, or are you okay?
I'm gonna ask for this.
Okay.
Why do whales sometimes do like flipper slapping?
Why do whales do flipper slapping? Okay, we're getting out of my realm, but I'll give you a little, I'll give you what I know. We don't, it depends. So sometimes it could be communication, sometimes it could be joy, sometimes it could be they're a little bit annoyed. So it depends kind of on the situation. So a lot of the marine biologists, which are really important, a lot of the whale watching companies and the boat captains are really knowledgeable on whale behavior because they have to see when they're out there what the whale is doing. Because just because it slaps its tail or its fin doesn't mean the same thing every time, right? So they have to be able to read the behavior, and if the whales kind of don't want to have a boat around them, they need to peel off, and we'll save that for another day. But if they're happy to be there, then you hang around and enjoy it with them. Because sometimes when they turn off the motor, the whales actually come up to the boat. I don't know if anyone ever had that before. It's really awesome.
For the one-off gray whales that have been found in the Atlantic and the Mediterranean, has there ever been any thought given to trying to get them back into the right place?
Where the Atlantic gray whale population used to be?
Oh,
Oh, got you. No.
it's probably hard to do.
Yeah, herding one gray whale would be expensive. I mean, people are just monitoring them and seeing what happens. There may be a point in time where there's enough that come over and I don't know, reestablish themselves. Who knows, right? I mean, we just don't know. So we're kind of monitoring and watching and seeing how they behave and seeing if we can figure out if they're finding foraging grounds or managing themselves. But I'd be on board.
Is there advocacy or legal action being put forth right now to the countries that are still whaling, along the lines of what you were saying, that the whales are climate change
I know, diplomacy is being used as a way to put pressure on the few whaling nations that still exist. We've got Iceland, Norway, and Japan that still hunt commercially whales. So, from state to state, there's activities to kind of put diplomatic pressure on them. That's what a lot of countries tried to do. I know that there are some countries with trading of whale meat, trying to make it a little more challenging to move your boats and things like that. So there's not direct legal action right now because, quite frankly, it's legal. So Japan pulled out of the IWC, the International Whaling Convention. You can, in international law, you can make a reservation and say, I still adhere to the Convention on Commercial Whaling, but not the Convention on International Whaling, but I make a reservation against the ban on commercial whaling. So I don't agree with that. And you can continue to function in the international space saying, like, we don't sign on to that part. So it's one of those things, and that's the hard part. So the trade is legal because it's in, and you see in Iceland and Norway, they have their own, it's called NAMCO, which allows them to look at the science, and they try to whale at sustainable rates so that the population isn't depleted. So they make efforts that way, and that legitimizes it in the international realm.
So I'm a photographer and researcher at Monterey Bay Whale Watch on the wharf here.
Yay.
You answered that question perfectly with the peck slapping.
Thank you.
Just this morning we had a juvenile and then some sea lions bugging this one humpback, and she kept peck slapping, so it could be annoying to the sea lions. But my question before that question was, last year we had like El Nino conditions come through, and we had like a 10-degree temperature spike in the water. So for 2 months straight, we had long-beak common dolphins, which we see maybe once or twice a year here, and they just stayed for 2 months straight. And then we didn't have our blue whales, which we usually see in the summer. The krill must not have been coming to that water just because of the temperature. Have you heard anything in your realm about the temperature in California last year? I know it's pretty recent.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've heard anything about that.
I have not heard anything or seen any of the science come out about that. But what I can say is that a lot of the scientists will use the El Nino temperature effects to see and try to gauge what will happen under climate change scenarios. So the El Nino and La Nina is important in that sense, and it's been relied upon in the past. And you can see changes too. I mean, there's scientific studies that have shown that the gray whales, there's changing in the breeding grounds and the use of breeding grounds during the El Nino events and things like that. So those things are important, and I'm sure the science is going to be coming out. And it's interesting too. So actually, California and Monterey Bay is one of the places that you'll probably actually see more species coming here with climate change. So in some ways, like, climate change will have an interesting, I don't know if it's a benefit, but this will be a change of what you experience here. Whereas other places in the whale watching communities, they are really concerned because they may have less and less whales coming to see them if climate change continues at the pace it does.
On your slide, that was the feeding grounds and breeding grounds. There was a section of red countries and area. I couldn't quite see on the slide what it said. Is that just because those countries don't give information on their whale populations? Like, why is that section of Saudi Arabia, Yemen, India, why is it all red right there in that area?
Because those whales don't migrate. So it's one of the residential populations, in the world. Yeah, thank you. I didn't point that out. Yeah.
I just couldn't quite read in the little section.
They move around within the area. So the countries have to collaborate on tracking them, but they don't go do the poll. Yeah, right? Well, thank you very much.
Another round of applause for Natalie. Great presentation. Thank you. Nice job.
Can I do a quick plug? This book, The Ocean in Us, which is where I wrote the chapter co-authored with a scientist who works on whale carbon. It's a great book that has, from A to Z, 32 chapters on different issues with the ocean, and it's written by female experts around the world. So it supports women in STEM, and it's a great resource. I use it to look at issues that I don't typically think about, and I look at it as a good kind of, I'm not going to say Wikipedia, but that kind of level. It's like 8 pages from the scientists of what's going on with that space. So it's a little plug, especially for your girls, to make sure they...
And where can you get that book?
You can get it online at Springer Books. It's on sale right now, and I believe I've had friends who bought it off of Amazon too. So,
Excellent.